bringing you information based in fact and science concerning today's marijuana. I'm your host, Chris Wolf, and this is Perspectives. With us today is a subject matter expert from the National Marijuana Initiative, sharing their perspective on the influence that today's more potent forms of marijuana products are having, both in our society and in their field of expertise. We're here today with our ecologist and wildlife expert, Dr. Greta Wengert. Dr. Wengert, welcome.
Thank you.
Dr. Wengert, talk a little bit about the ecological impact of trespass marijuana cultivation that people really are not aware of.
There are a lot of impacts I could talk about. I would start probably with the rampant use of pesticides on these sites. They mostly are fully unregulated. Some of the pesticides that are used are actually banned in the United States because of their high toxicity. We see all kinds of widespread contamination of the environment, including soil contamination with these pesticides, water contamination, which I think is a huge concern from an environmental and public health perspective. We see major amounts of water theft from our headwater streams on our national forests, which really provide a huge majority, at least in California, of the drinking water for residents of California. We're talking billions of gallons of water per year being literally stolen from our public lands. We see all kinds of wildlife poaching, so whether it's poaching for food by the growers that are living out there throughout the summer and into the fall, or just contamination and direct poisoning of wildlife with the intent to essentially just remove the nuisance wildlife from the crops, from the food, and from the camps that these growers establish in our remote forests. And probably an impact that people don't think about a lot is the risk to just recreationists, hunters, fishers, people just wanting to use our national forest. There's a risk to going out there which really causes people to step back and think, hey, do I want to wander into the wilderness of our public lands for recreation, or is it not safe enough for me to do that? And I think that's an unfortunate but unforeseen consequence of these dangers that are out there.
We spoke a little bit about water theft, but put into perspective for people the extent of the water theft and how these illegal growers are stealing the water.
These grow sites on our public lands are in very remote areas, and they require millions of gallons of water to cultivate marijuana throughout the season. So any one particular grow might divert 1 million to 2 million gallons of water per season. And if you add that up across national forests, national parks, even state lands, and some private lands where trespass grow is occurring, you essentially get to a point where there's billions of gallons of water being stolen. And to sort of put it in terms of what the average person can really relate to, what we think is taken from California's public lands in one growing season could likely support the entire city of San Francisco, all their water needs for several months out of the year.
And you mentioned the pesticides, the illegal pesticides being used. Talk a little bit about the extent of the overuse of pesticides that are being used and the exact damage being inflicted on wildlife and the environment.
The pesticides that are being used are very toxic. They're being used because they're really good at killing insects and mites and things that damage the crops. And therefore, they use them in high concentrations, much higher than ever would be used in a legal situation. Even the pesticides that are legal to use on crops and in people's gardens in California are being used out there. However, the way that they're using them and the concentrations at which they're using them are so much higher than would ever be allowed in a legal scenario, that they are filtering into the environment, and what we see is a long-term legacy impact where the biotic community is contaminated. Let's say, for instance, the prey community for spotted owls and fishers, both of which are species that are endangered and threatened in California right now. They get impacted by these pesticides just by consuming animals that have been exposed to these pesticides. So we start to see infiltration of these toxicants throughout the food web, and in ways that you wouldn't necessarily think would happen, right up the food chain to the highest consumers, and potentially the fact that we've detected them in game species to people that are consuming game species.
Dr. Wengert, we actually met 4 years ago when we were filming an illegal grow site in Sierra National Forest. Can you discuss a little bit how many estimated illegal grow sites there are in California versus how many they actually find every year?
It's really hard to say that. We know that the amount of grow sites that are detected and eradicated by law enforcement each year is much smaller than how many are actually out there. I've heard estimates anywhere from only 20% to 50% of the grows out there are actually detected. So what we know of is that in California alone, there's thousands of grows dating back 10 to 15 years. So we multiply that by anywhere from 2 to 5, and we likely have an estimate of how many are actually out there. So each one of these is impacting the environment in the ways I've described, and each one is a significant concern to sensitive species, sensitive environments, and the landscape as a whole.
And I believe it's not unusual for the people at these illegal grow sites to cause forest fires where thousands of acres of trees are destroyed, correct?
That's correct. So we have done a preliminary analysis looking at wildfires in California that have been directly caused by trespass illegal growers. And there are several of them. Some of them have resulted in the destruction of over 100,000 acres of national forest in a single wildfire. And so the risk is always there, especially in California's recent drought. Last year we had a wildfire down in the range of the California condor, which was deliberately initiated by a trespass grower, and it burned close to 100,000 acres, and it killed 9 endangered California condors. So this is yet another, what wasn't even on our radar 5 years ago is now a major concern of yet another environmental risk of these grow sites.
Dr. Wengert, you are always an amazing guest. Please come back, and thank you always and so much for being here. Thank you.
Thank you for having me.
To learn more facts about today's marijuana and its impacts, visit the National Marijuana Initiative's website at www.thenmi.org. Thank you for joining us for this episode of Perspectives.